The marble floor of the Grand Sol was so polished I could see my face in it, distorted and pale, like a ghost already half erased. My arms ached from the weight of the crystal vase, white lilies trembling with each step as water sloshed dangerously close to the rim. I focused on keeping it steady, anything to distract from the ice spreading through my chest. I'd been delivering centerpieces to this hotel for 4 months now, always through the service entrance, always invisible. Today, the loading dock was closed for a security sweep, something about a high-profile guest on the executive floors. So they'd redirected me through the main lobby, through this cathedral of wealth where every surface gleamed like it was mocking me. Of course, because my life wasn't complicated enough without walking through a space where Mark might see me. The lobby stretched before me like a runway I was forced to walk, all soaring ceilings and chandeliers that scattered light like shattered diamonds. The air was too clean, filtered through gold leaf vents and smelling of cold jasmine and old money. My sensible flats made no sound on that perfect floor, but I felt exposed anyway, a smudge on a pristine canvas. I kept my head down, counting steps, 37 to the executive elevators. Then I could vanish up to the 20th floor, deliver this arrangement for the gala setup, collect my payment, and disappear back into my small, safe world. 37 steps. I could manage that. Rachel. The voice stopped my heart mid-beat. That familiar tone, smooth as expensive scotch with something rotten underneath it, turned my blood to ice water. I didn't turn around. Maybe if I kept walking, he'd think he was mistaken. Maybe the universe would grant me this one mercy. Rachel, stop. I know that's you. Footsteps behind me, quick and purposeful. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I clutched the vase tighter and walked faster, water splashing over the rim onto my wrists. 20 steps to the elevators. Just 20 more steps. Don't you dare ignore me. His hand closed around my upper arm, spinning me with enough force that the vase tilted dangerously. Water spilled down the front of my shirt, cold and shocking. Mark looked exactly as he had 8 months ago, when I'd finally run sandy hair, perfectly styled. Gray eyes that had once seemed protective, but now just looked predatory. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my rent, his law firm's insignia glinting on his cufflinks. The scent of his cologne, cedar, and something sharp made my stomach turn. I need to make my delivery, I said, proud that my voice came out steady despite my shaking hands. Please let me go. Let you go? His laugh cut through the lobby's hushed elegance. Like you let me go? Just vanished one night? Changed your number? Filed a restraining order like I was some kind of criminal? The order expired 3 months ago, I said quietly, taking a step back. You know that. That's why you're here. And whose fault is that? He moved closer, invading my space the way he always had. Do you have any idea what you did to my reputation? My senior partner asked questions, Rachel. Questions about my domestic situation. I'm up for junior partner this year. There it was. Everything always circled back to Mark, his career, his image, how my existence reflected on him. I'd spent 2 years trying to be the perfect girlfriend for his trajectory. Attending firm dinners, laughing at senior partner's jokes, never mentioning my own dreams of owning a flower shop because florists don't make the kind of money that impresses people. The day I'd walked out with just my clothes and my grandmother's gardening shears had been the first time I'd breathed freely in years. I'm sorry you were hurt, I said, aiming for calm while my heart tried to break through my chest. But I did what I had to do. We weren't good for each other. What you had to do? His hand shot out, gripping my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, never hard enough to leave evidence. Mark was too smart for that, too connected to every judge in the city, but firm enough to communicate that I wasn't leaving until he allowed it. You humiliated me, made me look weak, and now you're going to make time for a conversation, a real one, so we can fix this. The vase wobbled in my other arm. You're going to make me drop this, and it's worth $400 I can't afford to replace. Then you should have thought about that before you destroyed 2 years of my life. My vision narrowed. the opulent lobby fading as my focus tunneled to his hand on my wrist, to the familiar sensation of being trapped in his gravity. This was how it had always been, his needs, his timeline, his control dressed up as love. I'd promised myself never again. "Let go of me." The words came out sharper than I expected, loud enough that a woman in a designer dress glanced our way before quickly looking away. Mark's expression shifted, his professional mask slipping to show something colder underneath. "We're making a scene, Rachel. You hate scenes. Just come to the bar with me for 20 minutes. We'll talk like adults, and then you can make your delivery." "I don't want to talk." "Too bad." His fingers tightened, his other hand reaching for the vase like he might take it hostage. "You don't get to just walk away from what we had without giving me closure. Without giving me what I'm owed." The elevator bank was 15 feet away. Gleaming brass doors, one of them half open, the car waiting. If I could just break free, if I could reach it before he caught up, I could escape. "Mark, please." I hated the pleading note in my voice. Hated that he'd reduced me to this again. "I'm working. I'll lose this contract if I'm late. One drink. 30 minutes." His smile was the one he used in depositions, the one that said he'd already won. "Then I'll let you go. I promise." We both knew that was a lie. 30 minutes would become an hour, then 2. Then he'd drive me home to make sure I got there safely. Then he'd want to come inside to just talk, want to remind me of good times, want to wear me down until I was too tired to fight anymore. I'd lived this script too many times. My eyes darted past him, searching desperately. The hotel staff looked away, trained to ignore conflicts among guests. The wealthy people in the lobby gave us a wide berth, unwilling to involve themselves in someone else's mess. I was alone. Again. The elevator doors began to slide shut. Something inside me snapped. I wrenched my arm free with sudden force, using his surprise against him. The vase slipped, and I let $400 of crystal and lilies crash to the marble floor in an explosion of water and glass and white petals. And I ran. Not gracefully. Not quietly. My flat slapped against the marble as Mark shouted behind me, his voice rising with fury and disbelief. Hotel security started moving, but I was closer. So much closer. I threw myself forward, my hand slamming against the elevator's closing doors. They bounced back open. I stumbled inside, gasping, spinning to hit the close door button frantically, and collided with something solid, something that didn't move. A wall of expensive fabric and controlled stillness. I looked up. The man I'd crashed into stood perfectly still, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a phone he'd been reading. He was tall, much taller than Mark, with black hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that suggested he'd never apologized for anything in his life, and eyes so dark they looked like polished obsidian. He wore a black suit that fit like it had been made on his body, the kind of tailoring that whispered of serious money. But it was the tattoo that made my breath catch intricate patterns that crawled up from his collar and disappeared beneath his jaw, dark ink against golden skin, dragons and clouds, and something that looked like flames. The executive elevator. I'd just thrown myself into the private executive elevator. "I'm sorry," I started, my voice breaking. But he didn't look at me. His gaze moved past my shoulder to where Mark had reached the elevator, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "Rachel, get out of there right now." The man's hand moved with casual precision, pressing a button on the panel. The doors slid shut in Mark's face, cutting off his words mid-sentence. The elevator was utterly silent except for my ragged breathing. I pressed myself against the far wall, still holding my empty hands out like I'd forgotten I'd dropped the vase. Water soaked through my shirt, making me shiver. Or maybe that was the adrenaline crash. "I'm so sorry," I said again, my words tumbling out in a rush. "I didn't mean to. I'll get off at the next floor. He wouldn't let me go, and I panicked. And I shouldn't have." "Be quiet." The words were soft, barely above a whisper. but they cut through my spiral like a blade. Not cruel, just absolute. The voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I fell silent, my heart still racing. He tucked his phone into his pocket with deliberate calm, then finally looked at me. Really looked at me, not the way Mark looked at me, like I was a problem to solve or a possession that had escaped. This was different. Clinical. Assessing. Like he was determining exactly how much threat or value I represented. "This elevator doesn't stop until the penthouse," he said. His English perfect but accented Korean, I thought, though his voice had the polish of someone who'd spent time in many places. "So you'll need to be quiet for approximately 90 seconds. 90 seconds trapped in four walls of brass and mirrors with a man who radiated danger like heat from a furnace." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The elevator began to rise, smooth and silent. In the mirrored walls, I could see myself wet, disheveled, eyes too wide and face too pale. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who'd just run for her life and crashed into something she didn't understand. The man's reflection was perfectly composed, his expression revealing nothing. Then the elevator shuddered. The lights flickered, once, twice, and we stopped moving. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a dim amber glow. The digital floor display froze at 15. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." The man pulled his phone out again, completely calm, and made a call in rapid Korean. I caught only a few words. My Korean was basic at best, but his tone suggested this was an inconvenience, not an emergency. He ended the call and looked at me with something that might have been amusement, though his expression barely changed. "It seems we'll be here longer than 90 seconds, he said. "The backup generator is being reset. 10 minutes, perhaps 15. 15 minutes." Trapped in an elevator, with a stranger whose presence made the air feel thinner. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my knees drawn up, trying to remember how to breathe properly. The walls seemed closer than they had been. The emergency lighting made shadows that moved wrong. "You're having a panic attack," the man observed, clinical and detached. "Look at me." I tried to focus on his face, but my vision was narrowing again. "Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. He counted it out, his voice steady and inflectionless as a metronome. Against all logic, it worked. My breathing slowed, my vision cleared. "Better," he said. It wasn't a question. We sat in silence, him standing perfectly still. Me crumpled on the floor for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds. "The man in the lobby," he said finally. "Your husband?" "Ex-boyfriend." My voice came out hoarse. We broke up 8 months ago. He won't accept it." "I see." He tilted his head slightly, studying me with that same unsettling intensity. "And you work for the hotel's floral service?" "I have my own business. Small. I do contracts with the hotel sometimes." I don't know why I was telling him this. Maybe because the alternative was sitting in silence with my thoughts. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, thick cardstock, matte black with silver lettering in Korean and English. He held it out to me. I took it with shaking hands. "Kang Tae-jun. Private consultations. No company name. No title. Just a name and a phone number." "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that made my skin prickle with awareness that I was in the presence of a predator. "Because," he said quietly, "I've been watching the hotel's security system for the past 20 minutes. I saw everything that happened in the lobby. Every word. Every moment he touched you." My blood turned cold. "You were watching?" "The hotel's head of security reports to me. I review incidents that occur on days when I'm in residence." He paused, letting that information settle. "Your former boyfriend's name is Mark Chen, junior associate at Park and Associates. His firm handles real estate litigation for several of my properties. Several of his properties. This man owned enough property in Seoul to have a law firm on retainer." "I don't understand what this has to do with me," I whispered. Kang Tae-jun crouched down, bringing himself to my eye level without crowding me. Up close, I could see the full extent of the tattoo. It disappeared beneath his collar and cuffs. But what was visible was intricate, deliberate, expensive. The mark of someone who'd earned the right to wear their danger openly. "It has everything to do with you," he said, "because men like him don't stop. He'll wait in the lobby. He'll follow you home. He'll use every legal connection he has to make your life difficult until you're too exhausted to fight." I knew he was right. The truth of it sat in my stomach like a stone. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Nothing. Yet." He stood, extending a hand to help me up. I stared at it for a long moment, strong, scarred across the knuckles, with a heavy silver ring on his right hand. I took it. His grip was firm, controlled, and he pulled me to my feet with effortless strength. "Keep my card," he said. "When he escalates and he will call that number, I'll make him disappear." "Disappear?" My voice came out strangled. "You mean—" "I mean exactly what I said." His eyes held mine, and in them I saw something ancient and uncompromising. Men like Mark Chen understand only one language: power. He believes he's untouchable because he wears a suit and knows judges. He's wrong. The elevator shuddered, then lurched back into motion. The lights brightened to their normal intensity. "Who are you?" I whispered. Kang Tae-jun straightened his cuffs, his expression returning to that mask of polite indifference. "Someone who prefers order to chaos. Someone who doesn't appreciate men who break what doesn't belong to them." "I don't belong to anyone." "No," he agreed, and something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "You don't. Remember that when you call." The elevator slowed, the digital display reading PH. The doors opened onto a private foyer where two men in black suits stood waiting security, clearly, with the same coiled readiness as their employer. Kang Tae-jun stepped out, pausing to look back at me. "Your former boyfriend is waiting for you on the 20th floor, where you were meant to make your delivery. I'd suggest taking the service elevator down. My men will ensure you reach it safely." "Why are you helping me?" The question burst out before I could stop it. He considered for a long moment. "Because I can," he said finally. "And because I dislike waste. You have talent, miss?" "Rachel. Rachel Kim. Rachel." The way he said my name felt like a claim. "I'll be seeing you again." He turned and walked away, his guards falling into step behind him, leaving me standing alone in the elevator with a business card burning in my palm and the terrible certainty that I'd just stepped out of one trap and glimpsed the entrance to another. But as I looked down at the card, at the simple name and number that promised protection and danger in equal measure, I couldn't make myself throw it away. Behind me, the elevator doors began to close, and I realized I hadn't pressed any buttons. I was still standing in Kang Tae-jun's private elevator, heading back down to a lobby where Mark was probably waiting, with security guards who served a man whose very name felt like a warning I should have heeded. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was something else entirely. If you're ready for a story about escape, healing, obsession, and a love that grows in the shadows of danger, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. The elevator doors sealed shut with a whisper of hydraulics, cutting off Mark's furious shout mid-syllable. The sudden silence was so complete it made my ears ring. I stood frozen, my back pressed against the brass wall, chest heaving, water from the shattered vase still dripping from my sleeves. And directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke, stood the man I'd collided with. He hadn't moved, hadn't even shifted his weight when I'd slammed into him like a panicked animal. He simply stood there, one hand still in his pocket, the other holding his phone with the same casual ease someone might hold a glass of wine. As if women didn't regularly throw themselves into his private elevator while fleeing their exes. The elevator began its ascent, smooth and silent, but I barely registered the motion. All my attention had narrowed to the man in front of me. He was tall, easily 6 feet, maybe more, with the kind of presence that made the already small space feel suffocating. His suit was black, perfectly tailored, the kind that cost more than I made in 3 months. But it wasn't the suit that made my breath catch in my throat. It was everything else. His face was all sharp angles and controlled stillness, like he'd been carved from something harder than marble. High cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes so dark they looked black in the elevator's lighting. His hair was swept back from his face, not a strand out of place despite my collision. But it was the tattoo that made my stomach drop. It crawled up from beneath his collar, intricate black ink against golden skin, dragons and clouds, and something that looked like flames, winding up the side of his neck and disappearing beneath his jaw. The kind of tattoo that wasn't decorative. The kind that told a story, that marked allegiance, that announced to anyone who understood exactly who and what he was. I'd seen tattoos like that before. In documentaries, in news reports about organized crime in Seoul. The kind that you earned, not bought. "I'm sorry," I gasped out, my voice breaking. "I didn't mean to. I'll get off at the next floor. His eyes moved from his phone to my face. Slowly, deliberately, like he was deciding whether I was worth his attention. When our gazes met, the apology died in my throat. I'd thought Mark's eyes were cold. I'd thought I understood what it meant to be looked at by someone calculating, someone assessing your value. I'd been wrong. This man's gaze was something else entirely. Not cold implied the absence of heat, something neutral, something that might warm given time. This was glacial, ancient, the kind of cold that existed at depths where no light reached, where pressure crushed everything soft into hardness. He looked at me the way a surgeon might examine a specimen. Curious, perhaps, but utterly detached, like I was something to be categorized, analyzed, and then filed away. "Be quiet." The words were soft, barely above a whisper, but they hit me like a physical force. Not cruel, not even unkind, just absolute. The voice of someone who'd never had to raise his volume to be obeyed. I fell silent immediately, some primal part of my brain recognizing authority when it heard it. He held my gaze for another long moment, and I felt pinned in place, a butterfly on a card. Then, with the same unhurried precision, he looked back at his phone, dismissing me as thoroughly as if I'd ceased to exist. The elevator continued its smooth ascent. In the mirrored walls, I could see myself disheveled, soaking wet, eyes too wide, face drained of color. I looked like a drowned rat, like something that had crawled out of the gutter into a palace. And beside me, reflected in that same mirror, he stood perfectly composed, not a wrinkle in his suit, not a hair out of place. The tattoo on his neck seemed to move in the shifting light, the dragon's eyes following me. I pressed myself harder against the wall, trying to make myself smaller, invisible. My mind raced through possibilities. Who was he? Security? Hotel management? No, the suit was too expensive. The tattoo too bold, the aura too overwhelming. This was someone who owned things, who commanded things. Someone dangerous. The digital display above the door climbed steadily. Floor 10, floor 11, floor 12. "This elevator doesn't stop until the penthouse," he said without looking up from his phone. His English was perfect. Accent present, but refined. Korean, definitely, but shaped by time in other places, other languages. "So you'll need to remain quiet for approximately 90 seconds. 90 seconds. I could manage 90 seconds. I'd survived 2 years with Mark, survived 8 months of looking over my shoulder. I could survive 90 seconds in an elevator with a stranger, even one who radiated danger like heat from a furnace. I nodded, even though he wasn't looking at me. The elevator hummed around us, a low mechanical sound that seemed too loud in the silence. I counted my heartbeats, trying to slow them, trying to calm the adrenaline still screaming through my veins. Floor 13, floor 14. Then the elevator shuddered. The lights flickered once, twice, and my stomach lurched as the smooth ascent stuttered, caught, and stopped. The digital display froze at 15. Emergency lighting kicked in, amber and dim, casting long shadows that made the small space feel even smaller. The man finally looked up from his phone, his expression unchanging, as if elevators stopped between floors for him all the time. Maybe they did. He pulled the phone to his ear and spoke in rapid Korean, his tone suggesting mild inconvenience rather than concern. I caught only fragments, something about a backup generator, a reset, time estimates. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Then, with the same unsettling calm, he turned to face me fully. "It seems," he said, "we'll be here longer than 90 seconds. The backup generator is being reset. 10 minutes, perhaps 15. 15 minutes. Trapped. In 4 brass walls with a man whose very stillness screamed predator. The walls seemed to press inward. The amber lighting made shadows that writhed and twisted. My breathing went shallow, rapid, my vision starting to narrow at the edges. "You're having a panic attack," he observed, clinical and detached, like he was noting the weather. I tried to answer, but no sound came out. My hands were shaking, my whole body trembling with the aftershocks of adrenaline and fear, and the sudden terrible understanding that I'd just locked myself in a cage with something far more dangerous than Mark could ever be. "Look at me." I forced my eyes to his face, though every instinct screamed to look away, to make myself small and unnoticed. His gaze locked onto mine, steady and unblinking. "Breathe in for 4 counts." I gasped in air. "Hold for 4. I held, my lungs burning. "Out for 4. I exhaled shakily. Again. He counted it out, his voice a metronome, steady and inflectionless and somehow anchoring. "In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Over and over until my vision cleared, until my hands stopped shaking quite so badly, until I could think again. "Better," he said. "Not a question, a statement of fact." We stood in the amber light, the silence now heavy with things unspoken. He studied me with that same surgical precision, and I had the terrible feeling that he could see everything, every fear, every secret, every desperate choice that had led me to this moment. "The man in the lobby," he said finally. "Your husband?" "Ex-boyfriend." My voice came out as a rasp. "We broke up 8 months ago. He won't let it go." His head tilted slightly, the only indication of interest. "I see." And in those 2 words, I heard something that made my skin prickle. Understanding. Not sympathy. Not pity. Understanding. Like he knew exactly what it meant to be hunted, to be claimed, to be unable to escape someone's reach. Like he'd been on both sides of that equation. The elevator shuddered again, but didn't move. We had time yet. Time trapped together in this amber-lit cage with a stranger who looked at me like he was deciding whether I was worth keeping. And I couldn't shake the terrible feeling that whatever happened in the next 15 minutes would change everything. The seconds stretched like taffy, thick and suffocating. I'd managed to slow my breathing, but my heart still hammered against my ribs, each beat counting down the minutes until the power returned, until I could escape this brass cage and this man who stood too still, watched too closely. He'd turned away from me again, his attention back on his phone, scrolling through something with the same calm precision he seemed to apply to everything, as if we weren't trapped, as if I wasn't falling apart against the wall behind him. I focused on the emergency lighting, counting the panels in the ceiling. 4. 4 amber lights casting everything in shades of old gold and shadow. The mirrored walls reflected us back, infinitely him, in perfect stillness, me a trembling wreck. That's when the elevator jolted. Not a gentle shudder this time. A violent lurch that threw me forward, my hands slamming against the brass railing to keep from falling. The lights flickered wildly, amber to black to amber, and a mechanical grinding sound screamed through the shaft. Metal on metal, wrong and terrible. Then the lights died completely. Absolute darkness swallowed everything. The kind of darkness that erased the boundaries of your own body, that made you disappear even from yourself. I couldn't breathe. The air had turned solid in my lungs. Don't move. His voice cut through the black, still calm, still controlled. The emergency lighting will reset in approximately 30 seconds. 30 seconds. I'd be dead in 30 seconds because I couldn't breathe, because the walls were closing in, because the darkness was pressing against my skin like water, drowning me from the outside in. My chest constricted, my throat closing. I could hear myself making sounds, small, desperate gasps that didn't bring any air. My legs buckled and I slid down the wall, my back scraping against brass, until I was on the floor, my knees drawn up to my chest. Rachel. My name in his voice, sharp as a slap. Focus. I couldn't. The darkness was absolute. Suffocating. My father's voice echoed in my head from years ago. From the night I'd gotten locked in the storage closet at school. From the 3 hours I'd spent in the dark before someone found me. Just breathe, baby. The dark can't hurt you. But he'd been wrong. The dark could hurt you. It could press you flat, crush you small, make you forget you ever existed. Look at me. I can't see you, I choked out, my voice high and thin, not my own. Then listen to me. His voice moved closer, measured footsteps in the dark. Put your hand out. What? Your hand. Put it out in front of you. I extended my trembling hand into the void, into nothing, expecting it to disappear into the black. His fingers closed around mine. The touch was shocking in its solidity, its certainty. Warm skin, firm grip, the heavy weight of that silver ring against my palm. Real, anchoring. Feel that? His voice was directly in front of me now, close enough that I could feel the displacement of air when he spoke. You're not disappearing. You're here. The dark is just absence of light. It has no weight. It has weight, I gasped. It's crushing me. It's not. His grip tightened, just shy of painful. That's your mind lying to you. Your heart rate is elevated. You're hyperventilating. Your brain is interpreting these physical symptoms as danger, when there is none. There's danger, I managed. We're stuck. We could fall. We won't fall. This elevator has 6 redundant safety systems. Even if every cable failed, which is mechanically impossible, the emergency brakes would engage. We're safer in this box than walking on the street. His voice never wavered, never softened. He spoke like he was explaining something obvious to a child, clinical and detached. And somehow, that cold precision was working. My mind had something to grip onto besides the panic. Count with me, he said. 1. I tried to match him, but my voice broke. 1, 2, 2, 3. We counted together in the darkness, his voice steady and mine gradually strengthening. Somewhere around 20, the emergency lights flickered back on, dim amber pushing back the black. I blinked against even that small light, my vision adjusting. He was crouched in front of me now, his hand still holding mine, his face level with mine. Up close, in the amber glow, his features were even sharper, more severe. The tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse in the shifting light. Better? He asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. He studied my face for a long moment, his dark eyes moving from my eyes to my mouth to the pulse hammering in my throat. Assessment. Calculation. You have claustrophobia, he said. Not a question. Since I was a kid, I got locked in a closet at school, 3 hours before anyone found me. I don't know why I told him that. Maybe because he'd just counted me back from the edge of panic. Maybe because his hand was still holding mine and that anchor felt like the only real thing in the world. And yet you live in a city of high-rises and subways. Something that might have been approval flickered in his expression. That requires discipline. Or stupidity. No. He released my hand and stood in one fluid motion, then extended it again to help me up. Discipline. You face what frightens you every day. That's not weakness. I took his hand and let him pull me to my feet. My legs were unsteady. but I managed to stay upright. "Thank you," I said quietly. For for helping me. You didn't have to." He straightened his cuffs, his expression returning to that mask of indifference. "I did, actually. Panic in enclosed spaces can be dangerous. You might have injured yourself." "Right. Of course. Practical concern, nothing more." But his hand had been warm. His voice had been steady. And for those minutes in the dark, he'd been the only thing keeping me from coming apart completely. The elevator groaned around us, the sound of machinery re-engaging. The amber lights flickered, then steadied. The digital display blinked back to life, showing floor 15, then slowly climbing to 16. "The power's returning," he said, checking his phone. "We'll reach the penthouse in approximately 2 minutes." 2 minutes. Then this strange, terrible interlude would be over. I'd step out into wherever he was going, make my way to the service elevator, and never see him again. That should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of something vast and dark, watching the only light I had walk away. "Your ex-boyfriend," Taejun said, not looking at me. "Does he know where you live?" The question dropped into the space between us like a stone into still water. "I don't think so. I moved right after we broke up. Different neighborhood." "You think?" He turned to face me fully. "But you're not certain." I wasn't. Mark had connections, resources. If he wanted to find me, he probably could. "Why do you care?" The question came out sharper than I intended. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something cold and predatory that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Because," he said softly, "I dislike unfinished business. And men who don't understand when something no longer belongs to them create complications." The elevator chimed. "Floor 20, then continued climbing. "I don't belong to anyone," I said, echoing my earlier words. "No," he agreed, still holding my gaze. "You don't." But the way he said it felt less like agreement and more like a challenge. The elevator slowed. The display read PH. Whatever was about to happen, I had the terrible certainty that the real trap hadn't been the elevator. It was what waited when the doors opened. The elevator settled with a soft chime, but the doors didn't open. Taejun pressed a button on the panel, something without a label, and the car remained still, suspended between floors. "Waiting. Before you leave," he said, adjusting his cuffs with precise movements, "you should understand something about the situation you've found yourself in." I pressed back against the brass wall, my brief moment of stability evaporating. "What situation?" "The one where a man with legal connections and family money has decided you're his unfinished business." He finished with his right cuff, and that's when I saw it more ink, darker and more intricate than what showed at his collar, crawling from beneath the fabric onto the back of his hand. Not just decorative patterns, but symbols. Characters in what looked like old Korean script, intertwined with scales that might have been a dragon's tail or a serpent's body. My breath caught. I'd seen enough crime dramas, read enough news articles. Tattoos like that weren't fashion statements in Seoul. They were resumes written in ink and pain, proof of loyalty earned through blood. His gaze followed mine to his hand. "You're staring?" "I'm sorry." I forced my eyes back to his face. "It's just, I've never seen anything like that up close." "No. I imagine you haven't." He didn't move to cover it, didn't show any shame or discomfort. Instead, he held his hand up slightly, letting me see it clearly in the amber light. "Do you know what they mean?" I shook my head. "These marks tell a story. Where you've been, who you serve, what you've survived." His fingers flexed, and the dragon seemed to move, coiling tighter. "In certain circles, they're a language more honest than words. They can't be faked, can't be bought, only earned. And you've earned them." It wasn't a question. "Every line." He lowered his hand, his dark eyes locking onto mine. "Which brings me back to your situation, Rachel. You asked earlier why I care. The answer is simple. I recognize the difference between types of predators. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. Mark isn't a predator, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. He can't let go. He thinks he owns me. Yes, that's precisely what makes him a bully, not a predator. Taejun's voice remained perfectly level, almost conversational, like we were discussing weather. A bully uses systems law, social pressure, reputation to control people weaker than himself. He hides behind legitimacy. His power is borrowed from institutions that protect him. Take those away, and he's nothing. He took a step closer, and I had nowhere to retreat. A predator, on the other hand, doesn't need systems. He creates his own power structure. He doesn't hide behind anything because he doesn't need to. When a predator decides you belong to him, there are no restraining orders, no lawyers, no police that will change his mind. He simply takes what he wants and dares the world to stop him. My mouth had gone dry. And you're telling me this because? Because you need to understand what you're dealing with. Men like Mark escalate. Right now, he's using public confrontations and legal pressure. Next, he'll wait outside your apartment. Then he'll start showing up at your workspace. He'll file complaints, make calls to your clients, damage your reputation until you're too exhausted to fight. He'll squeeze you slowly until you give in just to make it stop. Everything he said aligned perfectly with the Mark I knew. The calculated manipulation, the long game of attrition. My stomach twisted. But here's what he doesn't understand, Taejun continued, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. Bullies are afraid of predators. They recognize us instinctively. They know that all their borrowed power means nothing when they face someone who operates outside their comfortable systems. You're saying you're a predator. I'm saying I know what I am. His head tilted slightly, studying me with that same unsettling intensity. The question is whether you're smart enough to recognize the difference and brave enough to use it. Use it? I echoed. Use you. You mean, if necessary. No hesitation, no pretense. Mark will continue to hunt you because he believes you're vulnerable, isolated, prey. But if you align yourself with someone he fears, someone whose shadow is darker than his family connections, he'll retreat. Bullies always do when they meet something genuinely dangerous. I stared at him, my mind racing. You're offering to… what? Scare him off? I'm offering to make him disappear from your life. The way he said disappear made my skin prickle. Completely. Permanently. No more surprise visits. No more harassment. No more looking over your shoulder. And what would you want in exchange? Because men like him didn't offer protection out of kindness. There was always a price. Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. Smart girl. You understand transactions. He adjusted his other cuff, revealing more ink on that wrist, what looked like flames or wind, impossible to tell in the dim light. For now, nothing. Consider it an investment. An investment in what? In order. I prefer my properties to run smoothly. The Grand Soul is mine. When problems occur here, especially problems involving women being harassed in my lobby, it reflects poorly on my management. He straightened to his full height, and I was reminded again of just how much physical space he commanded. Your ex-boyfriend created a scene that required security intervention. He broke a $400 vase. He disrupted the elegant atmosphere I've spent considerable money cultivating. So this is about property damage. I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. His smile was brief, sharp as a blade. This is about making an example. Mark Chen needs to understand that there are consequences for causing chaos in spaces I control. You're simply the catalyst. I should have been relieved. He wasn't asking for anything, wasn't demanding I trade one cage for another. But something about his explanation felt incomplete, like he was telling me a truth wrapped around a deeper lie. Why do I feel like there's more to this? I asked quietly. He studied me for a long moment, and in his eyes I saw something ancient and patient. A predator that could wait decades for the right moment to strike. Because you're not stupid, he said finally. And because you understand, on some level, that protection always has a price, even when it's not collected immediately. He pressed the button, and the elevator doors finally began to open. But unlike your ex-boyfriend, I'm honest about what I am. I don't disguise control as love, ownership as care. When I take something, Rachel, everyone involved knows exactly what's happening. The doors revealed a private foyer, marble and gold, with two men in black suits standing at attention. Beyond them, floor-to-ceiling windows showed souls sprawling beneath us, glittering and vast. My men will escort you to the service elevator, Taejun said, stepping out into his domain. You'll find your payment for today's delivery has been tripled, along with a contract for exclusive arrangements for all penthouse events. Consider it compensation for your inconvenience. He paused, looking back at me, still frozen in the elevator. And Rachel? Keep my card. You'll need it sooner than you think. Then he walked away, his guards falling into step behind him, leaving me standing in the doorway between his world and mine, holding a business card that felt like a key to a door I wasn't sure I wanted to open. But as I looked down at the simple black cardstock, at the name written in silver, I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Because he was right. Bullies feared predators, and I was so tired of being afraid. I was halfway to the service elevator, flanked by Taejeon's silent guards, when his voice stopped me. Rachel. I turned. He stood in the doorway of what looked like an office, backlit by the glow of multiple screens. The light caught the sharp planes of his face, made the tattoo on his neck look like it was breathing. A moment, he said. Not a request. I glanced at the guards, but they remained expressionless, statues in expensive suits. I walked back toward him, my legs unsteady, and he stepped aside to let me enter. The office was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling windows on two sides, showing souls spread out like a circuit board of lights. But it was the wall of monitors that drew my attention. 12 screens showing different angles of the hotel. Lobby, corridors, elevator banks, kitchens. A private surveillance system. You watch everything, I said, understanding dawning cold and heavy. I watch what matters. He moved to stand beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne again, that dark cedar and smoke. Security reported an incident in the lobby 43 minutes ago. I reviewed the footage while waiting for the elevator to be repaired. He picked up a tablet from the desk, tapped it twice, and turned it toward me. The screen showed the lobby from a high angle. I watched myself walk through those gleaming halls, clutching the vase, counting steps. Then Mark appeared at the edge of the frame, calling my name. The whole confrontation played out in silent film, his hand on my arm, my attempts to pull away, the vase shattering, my desperate run. I saw everything, Taejun said quietly. Every word, every time he touched you, every moment you tried to escape. My throat tightened. Watching it from outside, seeing myself trapped and small and afraid, made something inside me crack. I also saw this. He swiped to another clip, dated 3 weeks ago. Different camera angle, but I recognized myself immediately hurrying through a side entrance, head down, moving fast. And there, at the edge of the frame, partially obscured by a marble pillar, was Mark, watching, waiting. He's been tracking your delivery schedule, Taejun continued, swiping through more clips. Mark in the parking garage. Mark in the coffee shop across the street. Mark talking to someone at the hotel's front desk, probably asking about me. For at least 3 weeks that I can confirm. Possibly longer. The room tilted. He's been stalking me. Yes. No sympathy in his voice, just cold fact. And he's been smart about it. Never close enough to violate the restraining order that expired. Never aggressive enough to prompt hotel security to intervene. Just present. A shadow you couldn't quite prove was following you. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly freezing despite the room's warmth. How long have you known? I noticed him 2 weeks ago. He fit a pattern, same times, same locations, always watching the service areas. I had my head of security compile a file. He set the tablet down and pulled a folder from his desk, handing it to me. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were printed surveillance photos, background check documents, and a detailed report. Mark Chen, 31, junior associate at Park & Associates, specializing in real estate litigation. Parents: Richard and Michelle Chen, significant donors to 3 city council members and the Police Benevolent Fund. Previous relationship: Rachel Kim, ended 8 months prior with restraining order filed. Expired. Current behavior: surveillance pattern consistent with obsessive monitoring. You investigated him. My voice came out hollow. I investigate everyone who displays abnormal behavior in my properties. When I saw him approach you today, I knew he would escalate. Taejun's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes had sharpened. What I didn't know was that you would run directly into my private elevator. That was unexpected. Lucky timing, I whispered. I don't believe in luck. He took the folder back, closing it with precise care. I believe in patterns. Mark has one. He escalates slowly, testing boundaries, watching for weakness. Today he broke that pattern because he's growing desperate. Men like him are most dangerous when they feel control slipping away. You're saying it's going to get worse. I'm saying it already is worse. You just haven't seen it yet. He turned to face me fully. He knows where you work. He knows your schedule. And now he knows you're afraid enough to run from him. That fear is what he feeds on. The weight of it all pressed down on me, months of looking over my shoulder, of changing my routine, of trying to make myself invisible, and it had never been enough. Mark had been there all along, watching, waiting, planning. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice breaking. Why show me all of this? Taejun was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes studying my face with that same unsettling intensity. Because you need to understand what you're up against, and what I'm offering you. He picked up his phone, pressed a button. Send him in. One of the guards entered, carrying a sleek black phone, not mine, something newer, expensive. Taejun took it and held it out to me. This phone has one number programmed into it. Mine. No one else can call it. No one else can track it. When Mark comes back, and he will come back, you press the red button. I'll handle the rest. I stared at the phone like it was a snake. I don't understand. You don't even know me. Why would you? Because, he interrupted softly, I've spent 15 years building an empire where I control every variable, where nothing happens in my city that I don't permit. Your ex-boyfriend is a loose thread. I don't tolerate loose threads. He pressed the phone into my hand, his fingers warm against mine. Keep it charged. Keep it close. And Rachel? His voice dropped lower, more intimate. When you call me, and you will call me, remember that I'm not doing this to save you. I'm doing this to remind certain people in this city that there are boundaries even family money can't cross. I left his office with 2 phones in my pocket, a business card in my wallet, and the terrible certainty that I'd just made a deal with someone far more dangerous than the devil I was running from. But for the first time in 8 months, I wasn't running alone. Wait. His voice caught me at the threshold again. I was beginning to think he enjoyed stopping me mid-escape, watching me turn back like a puppet on strings I couldn't see. There's something else you need to understand before you leave. Taejun moved to the window, his silhouette dark against Seoul's glittering sprawl. A clarification about the nature of what I'm offering. I stayed near the door, every instinct screaming at me to run. But I'd already taken his phone, already accepted his surveillance footage, already let him see too much. Running now would be pointless. You said it's not a gift, I said quietly. That it's about control. Partially. He turned to face me, the city lights behind him making it impossible to read his expression. But there's a concept you need to understand. In my world, we call it soyuguan, ownership. Not in the way your ex-boyfriend understands it, that childish possessiveness that demands you belong to him while he remains free. True ownership is reciprocal. He moved closer. each step deliberate. When I say I'll make Mark disappear, I don't mean frightening him or threatening legal action. I mean he will cease to be a problem in your life, permanently and completely. One phone call, and he vanishes from Seoul. From Korea, if necessary. He'll wake up in another country with a new understanding of what happens when you touch what's mine. My breath caught. I'm not yours. Not yet. His eyes held mine, dark and patient. But if you accept my protection, if you use that phone I gave you, you will be. That's the alliance I'm offering. Not slavery, not romance alliance. You enter my sphere, and in return, you're untouchable. No one harms you. No one threatens you. Your business thrives because people know you're under my shadow. And what do you get? My voice shook despite my attempt at steadiness. Loyalty. The word fell between us like a blade. When I call, you answer. When I need something within your capability, you provide it. Your time, your discretion, your trust, these become mine to command. Not always, not constantly, but when it matters. That sounds like ownership. It is ownership, but it's honest ownership. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. I don't pretend to love you while controlling you. I don't disguise chains as care. I'm offering you a transaction. Absolute protection for absolute loyalty. You'll know exactly where you stand at all times. No lies, no manipulation, no gaslighting about whether you're being unreasonable. His hand rose, and I forced myself not to flinch. He touched the business card visible in my jacket pocket, his fingers gentle but deliberate. Mark made you doubt yourself, made you question your own reality. I won't do that. When I tell you something, it's truth. When I make a promise, it's kept. When I take something, you'll know exactly what you've given and what you've received. You make it sound reasonable, I whispered. But you're talking about making someone disappear, about owning another person. I'm talking about survival. His voice remained soft, almost tender, which somehow made it more terrifying. Your ex-boyfriend has money, connections, and obsession. You have a struggling flower business and fear. Those aren't equal forces, Rachel. Without someone like me, he wins. It's just a matter of time. I wanted to argue, to say I could handle Mark myself, that I didn't need a monster to fight my monsters. But the surveillance footage flashed through my mind, Mark watching, waiting, stalking me for weeks while I'd remained oblivious. Why me? I asked, desperately. Why offer this to someone you just met? His smile was brief, cold, and somehow sad. Because you remind me that some things are worth protecting, even in this city of wolves. And because I can. He stepped back, releasing me from the weight of his proximity. The phone stays with you. The choice stays with you. But understand, once you make that call, once you ask me to handle Mark, the alliance begins. There's no trial period, no changing your mind. That's not a choice. That's a trap. No, Rachel. His eyes gleamed in the dim light. That's honesty. The trap is pretending you have better options. He gestured to the door, dismissing me. I left his office with his words echoing in my skull, and the weight of the phone burning through my pocket like a brand. Outside, Seoul glittered beneath me, beautiful and brutal and full of wolves. And somewhere in that sprawl, Mark was waiting. The phone in my pocket suddenly felt less like a trap and more like the only weapon I had left. I should have left. The guards were waiting to escort me to the service elevator. The door was open. Freedom just steps away. But something made me turn back one last time. Can I ask you something? Tae-jun looked up from his desk, surprised or as close to surprised as someone like him could look. Yes. Why flowers? The question tumbled out before I could stop it. You knew I was a florist before today. You've been watching. So why does someone like you care about someone who arranges flowers for a living? He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he did something unexpected. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. I sat, perched on the edge of expensive leather, every muscle tense. Tell me about your shop, he said. The one you want to open. Not the one that exists, the one you dream about. I blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. I I don't see what that has to do with. Humor me. So I told him. About the small storefront I'd found in Yeonam-dong, with tall windows that caught the morning light. About the vintage coolers I'd been saving for. The wooden tables I wanted to restore myself. About specializing in seasonal arrangements, nothing imported, nothing wasteful, just what grew in Korea, celebrated at its peak. I want to create something that lasts, I said, my voice growing stronger as I spoke. Not just the arrangements, but the knowledge. I want to teach workshops, show people that flowers aren't just decorations, they're conversations. Each stem means something. Each color carries weight. I stopped, suddenly self-conscious. It sounds stupid when I say it out loud. No. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. It sounds like someone who understands that beauty requires discipline. He stood and moved to the window, his back to me. My mother was a florist, a real one, not someone who just arranged what others grew. She had a small shop in Busan. Before, he paused, before she died, the admission hung in the air, unexpected and raw. She used to say that flowers were honest, he continued. They bloom when they're ready, die when their time comes. No pretense, no lies, just existence in its purest form. He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw something human in his eyes, something that looked almost like grief. She believed that anyone who could work with flowers and not try to force them into shapes they weren't meant to hold had integrity worth protecting. My throat tightened. I'm sorry you lost her. So am I. He returned to his desk, the vulnerability closing like a door. But that's why I notice people like you, Rachel. You've been harassed, stalked, broken down, and yet you still show up every week with arrangements that are perfect. Not because they're expensive or showy, but because they're right. Each stem exactly where it belongs. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. That's resilience. Not the kind that survives by becoming hard, but the kind that stays soft in a world designed to crush softness. That's rare. That's worth something. Worth protecting, I said quietly. Yes, no hesitation. Most people break and become their trauma. You broke and stayed yourself. That takes strength most people never develop. I looked down at my hands, calloused from thorns and stems, stained with chlorophyll that never quite washed out. Hands that created beauty every day despite everything trying to stop them. My mother would have liked you, Taejun said softly. She would have said you had jung, that deep connection to things that matters more than skill. When I looked up, his mask was back in place, but something had shifted between us. Some understanding that hadn't existed before. The offer stands, he said. When you're ready. I nodded and stood, my legs steadier than they'd been all night. As I reached the door, his voice stopped me one last time. Rachel? Your shop in Yeonam-dong, the storefront with the morning light. I own that building. A pause. The rent is very reasonable for the right tenant. I left without answering, but we both knew what he'd just offered. Not just protection, a dream. And dreams, I was learning, could be the most dangerous chains of all. The service elevator descended in silence. Just me and one of Taejun's guards. He hadn't spoken a word, just stood with his hands clasped in front of him, eyes forward, a statue in an expensive suit. We reached the 20th floor where I was supposed to have made my original delivery. The doors slid open. Mark was waiting. He stood in the corridor with 2 hotel security guards, his face flushed with anger barely contained beneath a veneer of professional civility. When he saw me, something vicious flashed in his eyes. There you are. He stepped forward, but the security guards moved with him, uncertain. We need to talk about the damages you caused. The hotel is considering pressing charges for destruction of property. My stomach dropped. Of course he'd twisted it, made himself the victim, made me the problem. I didn't, I started. But my voice came out weak, defensive. Mr. Chen. The voice came from behind me, cold and absolute. I turned to see Taejun stepping out of a second elevator. His private one must have descended after mine. He moved with unhurried grace, his guards materializing beside him like shadows given form. The entire hallway seemed to shift, the air growing heavier. The hotel security guards straightened instinctively, suddenly aware they were outranked by something that had nothing to do with badges or titles. Mark's expression faltered, confusion bleeding into his anger. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" Taejun didn't answer immediately. He simply walked past me, positioning himself between Mark and the elevator, between Mark and me, shielding me with his body without making it obvious, without making it look like protection, making it look like ownership. "Kang Taejun," he said quietly. "I own this hotel, and you're trespassing." Mark's face went pale, then red. "Trespassing? I'm a guest here. I have every right." Had. Taejun's correction was soft as silk and sharp as a blade. Past tense. "Your membership to this hotel and all associated properties has been terminated, effective immediately." "You can't do that. Do you have any idea who my family is? Who my firm represents?" "Park and Associates. Real estate litigation. Your firm handles 3 of my smaller properties." Taejun's expression never changed, bored almost, like he was reciting a grocery list. "Not anymore. I've already notified your senior partner that I'm moving my business elsewhere." I believe the email used the phrase, "concerns about professional conduct." The blood drained from Mark's face. "You can't. That's millions in annual fees." "Yes." Taejun pulled out his phone, tapped something, and turned it toward the security guards. "This is surveillance footage from today's lobby incident. You'll note Mr. Chen physically restraining Miss Kim against her will, causing her to drop valuable hotel property in her attempt to escape. The vase was worth $400. Miss Kim was working under contract with this hotel." He lowered the phone, his eyes finally meeting Mark's, and whatever Mark saw there made him take a step back. "You have 2 choices," Taejun continued in that same quiet, conversational tone. "You leave Seoul voluntarily and permanently tonight, or I send this footage to every contact in your phone, every partner at your firm, every judge your family has purchased over the years, along with documentation of your 3-week stalking pattern." "This is insane." "This is business." Taejun moved closer, and Mark actually retreated. "You created a problem in my hotel. You harassed someone under my protection. You damaged my property and wasted my time. These are not things I tolerate." His hand rose, and one of his guards immediately handed him a folder. He held it out to Mark. "Inside, you'll find a plane ticket to Singapore, a 6-month lease on an apartment, and a letter of introduction to a firm there that might hire you if you're lucky. You have 3 hours to pack and leave. If you're still in Seoul by morning, the footage goes public, and you'll find that your family's money means considerably less than you think." Mark's hands shook as he took the folder. His eyes darted to me, and I saw it the moment he understood. The moment he realized I wasn't alone anymore, wasn't vulnerable, wasn't his. "Rachel," he tried once more. "Miss Kim is no longer your concern." Taejun's voice dropped to something dangerous, something that made the temperature in the hallway plummet. "She's mine. If you speak to her, look at her, or think about her too long, I'll hear about it. And next time, Mr. Chen, I won't offer you a plane ticket." The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Then Mark turned and walked away, the folder clutched in his white-knuckled hands, flanked by security guards escorting him out. I stood frozen, watching him disappear around the corner. 8 months of fear, of looking over my shoulder, of jumping at shadows gone, just like that. Because a man who commanded shadows had decided I was worth protecting. Taejun turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "You didn't call," he said quietly. "I handled it anyway. Why? Because I don't wait for permission to do what needs to be done." He adjusted his cuffs, and I caught another glimpse of those tattoos, those marks of violence and loyalty. "Consider it a demonstration. Now you know what I'm capable of when you do call." He walked past me toward his private elevator, pausing only long enough to speak without looking back. "The alliance has begun, Rachel. Whether you agreed to it or not." The elevator doors closed, leaving me alone in the corridor with his guards watching, silent and patient. In my pocket, the phone he'd given me felt heavier than stone. And for the first time since I'd fled into that elevator, I wondered if I'd escaped Mark only to be caught by something far more inescapable. I stood in that corridor long after Taejun's elevator had disappeared, long after his guards had melted back into the shadows. The hotel around me continued its elegant operation, soft music, muted conversations, the whisper of expensive fabric against marble floors. But something fundamental had shifted. I pulled out the black phone he'd given me, turning it over in my hands. Sleek, unmarked, heavy with implication. On impulse, I pressed the power button. The screen lit up with a single contact. Lung. Dragon. Not his name. His title. What he was, not who he was. My regular phone buzzed. A notification from the hotel's accounting department. Payment deposited for today's delivery. I opened it, then stared at the number. Not the agreed-upon fee. Not even triple, as he'd promised. 10 times the amount. And below it, another message. Contract attached for review. Exclusive floral design for all penthouse events. Retainer. 15 million monthly. 15 million won. Monthly. For work I'd been doing piecemeal for a fraction of that amount. My hands shook as I scrolled down to the contract details. Professional, legally binding, with one clause that made my breath catch. Designer operates under the direct patronage and protection of the property owner. Protection. There it was, written in legal language. I wasn't just being hired. I was being claimed. I looked up to find one of Taejun's guards still waiting, patient as stone. "Miss Kim," he said in perfect English. "Mr. Kang has arranged for your transportation home. The car is waiting." "I can take the subway," Mr. Kang insists. Not a request, not a suggestion. I followed him to the underground parking garage, my mind spinning. The car was exactly what I expected: black, expensive, windows tinted dark enough to hide anything. The driver opened the door without a word. As we pulled into Seoul's glittering night traffic, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different, not just disheveled from the night's chaos, but sharper somehow, like I'd been redrawn with bolder lines. For 2 years with Mark, I'd made myself small, quiet, invisible. The perfect girlfriend who never caused problems, never demanded too much, never took up space she hadn't been given permission to occupy. For 8 months after leaving him, I'd stayed small, stayed invisible, because invisible meant safe, meant he couldn't find me, couldn't hurt me. But tonight, I'd been seen, really seen, by someone who looked at my smallness and decided I deserved to take up space, who looked at my fear and decided it was unacceptable, who looked at the man hunting me and said simply, "No, she's mine now." The car stopped outside my apartment building, the tiny place above the bakery, with a window that stuck and the radiator that clanged. My safe space, my invisible space. But as I climbed the stairs, I noticed things I'd never seen before. The security camera at the entrance, new, professional grade. The man reading a newspaper on the corner, who looked up as I passed and gave a slight nod. The black sedan parked across the street, with someone sitting in the driver's seat, patient and watchful. Taejun's people. Already here. Already watching. Already protecting. Inside my apartment, I set both phones on the table. My regular one, connection to my small, safe life. His phone, connection to something vast and dangerous and utterly inescapable. I pulled out his business card. That simple black rectangle with silver lettering. Kang Tae-jun. Private consultations. Such an innocuous description for someone who could exile a man with a phone call, who commanded loyalty written in tattoos and blood, who looked at people like they were pieces on a board only he could see. I should have been terrified. Should have been planning my escape, my own exile from Seoul, running from both Mark and the dragon who'd swallowed Mark whole. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. And beneath that, something more dangerous. Powerful. Because I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen, known, claimed by someone who made the world bend to his will. Mark had looked at me and seen prey. Tae-jun looked at me and saw something worth protecting, worth investing in, worth keeping. I didn't belong to myself anymore. I understood that now. The alliance had begun without my permission, had wrapped around me the moment I'd crashed into his elevator, the moment he'd decided I was his concern. But as I looked down at the contract on my phone, at the number that would change my life, at the dream of my flower shop suddenly within reach, I realized something that should have horrified me but instead felt like truth. I didn't want to be invisible anymore. I wanted to bloom, even if it meant blooming in the shadow of a dragon. I picked up his phone and saved my own number into it, sealing the alliance from my side. Then I turned off the lights and watched the black sedan watching my window, a silent guardian in the Seoul night. For the first time in 8 months, I slept without fear. And if that made me complicit in my own captivity, if that made me willing prey to a predator who promised honest ownership over manipulative love, well, at least I'd chosen my cage this time. At least this cage came with keys that looked like flowers.